Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 28th of May 2024. Team, it's better when we're together. A bit of Jack Johnson for you there to start the day off. What do we have? Well, the Ukrainian General Staff figures, as per usual, all the caveats apply to these. You can find these in the description to this video below. There's some pretty high numbers here. An uptick in personnel loss. We've seen that go down to sort of 1,100s and 200s. We have seen it as high as 1,780 after Kharkiv was attacked from the north. Now it's ticked back up. Yesterday must have been a pretty challenging day for the Russians. We have not only a high number in personnel, but also in tanks. 21 tanks destroyed or damaged or abandoned or captured. And that's a very high number. We had, I think, 9 yesterday. 40 armoured personnel vehicles destroyed. That was below average yesterday. Now that is over twice the average. And 48 artillery systems, almost 3 times the average there. So that is a really high set of numbers across all of those categories. This is a difficult day for the Russians, if these numbers are to be trusted. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 46 vehicles and fuel tanks, 4 pieces of special equipment. Now, there's no Andrew Perpetua loss list yet today, but we do have a few elements of working out if these numbers are justifiable. And the first one is from Phillips O'Brien. This is in the context of the British UK Defence Journal coming out and saying 450,000 is pretty much what we think the Russians have lost in terms of personnel, which aligns fairly closely to the 500,000 that the Ukrainians have claimed. We're always trying to work out whether their figures are anywhere near reality. And I think over the course of the 2 years, we have shown them to be at least somewhat realistic. Phillips O'Brien says it's worth noting that Ukrainian figure for Russian personnel losses, assuming it's KIA and seriously wounded, which is now being admitted by the Ukrainians themselves, is exactly what we are hearing from the UK, from French and German intelligence. So I've shown you French and German claims that align with the Russian losses according to Ukrainians. He's adding in German intelligence there. I've not seen the German intelligence, but it's really interesting that there is this agreement amongst intelligence agencies that the Ukrainian figures are realistic. However, the caveat is definitely this, and I've said this a number of times before: the foreign intelligence agencies are going to be basing their figures largely on what the Ukrainians are telling them. You don't have foreign observers sitting on the front lines observing with binoculars, or sitting in dugouts observing on the iPad screens what first-person view drone pilots are doing. You don't have foreign observers sitting in command and control nodes up and down the front line in Ukraine confirming these numbers. So the numbers that the UK intelligence, for example, have to go by, the raw data is going to be what the Ukrainians are claiming. Now, I would imagine they have access to data sets that we don't. We see what the Ukrainian General Staff are claiming on a daily basis, but we don't have access to the actual raw data, and we don't have the tools as easily, maybe, to confirm or disconfirm those claims in terms of what the UK, French and German intelligence may have, satellite imagery, to look at, say, the lost numbers of vehicles. I think personnel is a difficult one because I think there's a lot of estimation there, but what we can assume here, I think, is that the intelligence agencies are doing a job of verification or checking at least, right? And this has verified those General Staff claims. So that is something, right? These are 3 data points to add to our overall picture of what is going on. And although it's not perfect, because they will be largely depending on the Ukrainian General Staff stats, they are going to be doing that checking with their own tools. Now, when we add other bits of the jigsaw into the overall picture, we see it's difficult for the Russians. Russians are hurriedly ensuring that this video was deleted, says Tim White. It shows an overcrowded hospital in Belgorod, region with many injured soldiers. So this is a video that kind of got out, a clip that got out of just lots of Russian soldiers being lined up, injured around Belgorod. Of course, you've got the Kharkiv offensive taking place just south of here, and you would imagine that there's going to be a big run on hospital beds and blood in the Belgorod area. We see in Yakutsk a video that shows that the Russians are, well, the morale is down for those who have been injured, and that is manifesting itself in people refusing to go back to fight. So in Yakutsk, which is quite far to the east, very far, the military personnel who came for treatment are kept in cells. About 28 military personnel who were previously wounded in Ukraine are being held by force in a pre-trial detention center in Yakutsk for refusing to go back to war. Physical violence is used against military personnel as well as other forms of torture. They limit the ability to go to the toilet, play music at full volume, and that is, they're played Ruski Mir, which is Russian world, over and over on repeat. It's just like psychological torture. That's to their own personnel. It's just quite incredible. And this, you need to place this together with other data points. So I've seen an awful lot of footage of Russian soldiers. So, for example, I've just seen a piece of 4 Russian POWs caught, placed in a basement, and 50% of them, okay, two out of 4 of them are black, right? I've just seen Africa Corps members behind the lines, the Russian, some people taking a photo together. 3 of these people, 2 of them are black, 1 of them's Russian. And that's not to say there are no black Russians, right? But the idea is that I think the Russians are really leaning heavily on recruiting from abroad. That's partly why they're in the Sahel, obviously to line their own pockets and fund the war by, getting blood diamonds and gold out of Africa, and also uranium. But also, it's a source of people who want social mobility. You've got a lot of people who would very much appreciate the money that they can get for fighting for the Russian armed forces. So I think Russia are doing a really good job as far as sort of evaluating things from their point of view of recruiting, as is claimed, some 30,000 soldiers a month. That is more than they are losing. So at the moment, it's been very bad. The figures are over 1,000 a day. But the average is, whatever the average is at the moment, it's probably moving up towards 700, goodness me. But as long as they are recruiting above that consistently on a daily basis, then that's really good news. In fact, that's not the one we want to see. We want to see the dashboard to get the averages for the losses. This is Bill's dashboard here. That gives us a sense of losses on a single day, but also the averages. So the personnel at the moment, max has been 1,740. The average is 626. Okay, so if they are recruiting on average 1,000 people a month and they are losing on average 626 people a month, then that gives them a net gain of 375 people. And that then feeds into troop accumulation. So they're replacing the ones they lose. So that's the 626, 625. And then your 375 go into a pool of reserves. And that builds up to your 50,000 that attack in Kharkiv. And this appears, again, it's placing all these data points together. But more and more of these troops appear to be foreign troops. So as I said, that Chinese mercenary video the other day showed him, well, he's a Chinese mercenary himself, his friend that he called Little Black, the black fighter that was not Russian. He was talking about Nepalese, he was talking about Cubans, he was talking about Indians. It just seemed to be, and when he was talking about units, there was one unit he was talking about where only 50% appeared to be Russian and the rest were foreigners. So more and more we are seeing foreigners drafted in to do the fighting for the Russians because the Russians are refusing to do so, and the Kremlin doesn't want the popularity issue of mobilizing internally, and the effect of on morale of troops coming back to their regions, to their towns and cities, not happy with the state of affairs, PTSD, all that kind of thing. They'd much rather have those problems incurred abroad by recruiting foreign fighters. And that is a challenge for the Ukrainians because they have less ability to do that, and less political will to do that. Right, moving on to sort of equipment stuff here. 5 enemy D-30 howitzers per day by drone operators from the Strike Drones Company of the 47th Assault Brigade. So these guys, when we go back to look at the artillery losses, and this is an area where we don't see an awful lot of visually confirmed evidence. People like Andrew Perpetua and his team, they don't do as much verification of artillery pieces. A lot of their visual analysis comes from satellite imagery looking at the real frontline areas. And as they're looking for shelling, they're also looking at geolocating destroyed and damaged vehicles. But of course, artillery is another 20 kilometers back from there, and or 10 kilometers or wherever it is. And they don't have the time or the resources to be looking at satellite imagery all the way back there on both sides, right? So a lot of their visually confirmed evidence is coming from the frontline areas of the contact line. And that's going to skew very much towards vehicles being destroyed as opposed to artillery being destroyed. It's not to say artillery isn't destroyed. So when we see those loss lists from Andrew Perpetua, it is not disconfirming of the artillery piece claims from the general staff. It's just it's not in the remit of the Andrew Perpetua loss list to support those claims. But then there are the data points we can look at, such as this one, which is one company saying that they destroy 5 enemy howitzers per day, and that's just one company in one area along the entirety of the front line. And here they produce some evidence to support that. So there are places we can go to see if those claims are at least somewhat correct. Andrew Perpetua is having a bit of a rant here. He's saying here we can, well, not really a rant, but it's just sort of taking the mickey out of Soviet era equipment. So he says here we can see an unparalleled superiority, says sarcastically, of Soviet engineering going up against the greatest of hide and seek. First, Estrela 10 fires a missile at Zala. So the way I understand this, we are seeing a Zala, a Russian drone, spot on Ukrainians here. So it spots a Strela 10, which is Soviet-era air defense piece of kit that Ukrainians are using. That fires a missile at the Zala, which heroically misses. So the idea is like you got a Russian piece of kit not doing a good enough job, or effectively like a Soviet-era piece of kit. Next, the Strela enters its hidey hole, never to be seen again. Somehow, against all odds, the Strela is then spotted, so it can be seen, and then a Lancet appears in the distance, guided by Stalin himself. It zigs, it zags, not intentionally, it's just Soviet engineering. Soviet engineers know more about where you want to fly than you do, to confuse the NATO liberals. And then, I just love the way he's written this. And then finally, the approach. Here it comes, the hammer and sickle of justice, directly into the Nazi tree. That is the tree's punishment for spying on the Soviet Zala and telling the Strela where to shoot. So all in all, it's just the idea that they see an awful lot of footage on a daily basis, and they see an awful lot of misses and stuff that goes wrong, and just a lot of equipment that doesn't do what it should be doing. And actually, we can go back to the S300s and S400s that were firing off at the ATACMS, missing the ATACMS, and the ATACMS just destroying the entire battery. So again, that, as mentioned previously, that's a 40-year-old missile from the US taking out the most recent air defense system of the Russians. There is a bit of an issue here. Right. Anyway, we are moving on to just some more evidence of how the Russians go about doing their war criminal activity. Now, this is in Snihurivka. I have been to this village. This is where Mark and Olena, or Olena's parents, live. When I interviewed Mark and Olena recently on the live, please go and check that out. It's evergreen, so you can watch it. It's not like particularly topical. Go and check that one out. I've interviewed them twice. Had a lovely chat to them. This is in that village, right? And I hope her parents are safe. So Russia fired a missile into a self-service car cache in Snihurivka. 4 are wounded. 1 girl is wounded very seriously. This is just obviously not cool. and Ukrainians just suffer so much as the Russians hit overtly civilian infrastructure. He goes on to say actually 5 wounded, 17-year-old was worst off. There was also a boy. Oh no, 6 wounded, now 2 dead. So as the news came in, 3 dead, 6 wounded. It just gets worse and worse. And that was in that area of Kherson that, as I say, I visited. And it's not acceptable that is happening. Terribly sad. Talking of cars, though, back in Russia, in Moscow, in the Mytsyshchi district, 10 cars were burned out in a parking lot. No casualties. Emergency services said a fire is now extinguished. I don't know if this is anything remotely to do with the war, but my goodness, there's a lot of fires in Russia, and many of them appear to be purposeful, whether it's insurance, whether it is about partisan activity, I don't know, but it's a challenge for the Russians. And another fire here, and another. This is an issue actually in the port of Azov, in the Rostov region. So this is just over the border from, if you can picture Crimea, top right of Crimea, you have Berdyansk, Mariupol, and then you have the border of Russia and Ukraine. At Donetsk, you get Taganrog and Rostov on Don. And that's the Sea of Azov, that part of the Black Sea, just at that top right hand area. That is where you have this port that is burning. According to preliminary information, the Azov Don grain terminal is on fire. Have no idea why, but that was burning yesterday. Moving on to strikes and distance munitions being used, we have 3 attack drones sent into Ukraine last night. As far as Tim White is aware, all 3 were shot down over Dnipropetrovsk, Cherkasy and Zaporizhia. So a very quiet night, comparatively speaking. We'll talk about the number of drones being produced by the Russians, because there are claims that maybe as many as 6,000 drones are being made in that one installation that was targeted in Tatarstan some time back. It's the one where you got these sort of 16, 17-year-old college kids in this college associated with the production facility that are having to work in there as kind of slave labor. And that was targeted. The dormitories there were targeted. I don't know if that was the actual primary focus of the drone. It kind of landed between. It didn't do as much damage to the place as one would like, but the main facilities are certainly got to be target number one there. That's a place where the Ukrainians would really like to hit, but it is quite far away from the front lines, and you either do that with drones that come with, you know, all of the vulnerabilities they have of actually getting that far, getting through air defenses and getting through electronic warfare jamming, which you'll be assured there will now be around this place, as they know it's been targeted once. So you're thinking, what else can we hit it with? Well, the only other thing that makes sense would be the JASSM cruise missile with 1,000-kilometer range from the Americans, but they don't have those. So anyway, they are making 6,000 of those a week, 6,000 a year, which equates to 115 a week by my maths, which means we should be seeing 115 drones being used a week. Shahed type drones, that's the claim. Don't think we're seeing that, so the numbers don't look to be realistic, but nonetheless, you know, that has got to be top of the list of targets. That's a Tatarstan production facility. The Russians hit Borova, which is on the Oskil River, kind of, if you think the Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea, about halfway down that front line. If you go left, so if you go west, you hit the Oskil River that comes down from Kupiansk. Halfway down that's a town called Borova that was supposed to be one of the, it's Novoherivka, where they had that attack towards the west, Ryarodka, Novoherivka. That was the end goal, was to get to Borova. That gets battered quite a bit, and here we see some pretty horrible footage coming out there of residential buildings being destroyed, people being injured, and a Novopochta being here, which is a post office again, civilian infrastructure. Now, the biggest bit of news really for this whole video, and I am very excited to see what the outcome is of this strike, was a massive strike last night on an airbase in Luhansk. So we've already seen an airbase in Luhansk get taken out with ATACMS before, giving a whole host of I can't remember quite how many helicopters were taken out in that strike, but nonetheless, I don't know if it's the same airfield, but here we have another airfield getting hit in Luhansk, and significant fires taking place, and not quite or exactly on the airbase either, which suggests that there were air defense systems that were primarily being targeted. Fire is monstrous, apparently, and it might have even caused a wildfire around it. And we'll look at some footage in a second. So Ilya Ponomarenko, the Ukrainian journalist and author, says, "Good God, this is a massive hit now. Lots of people here." Here's the main footage reportedly showing the fiery aftermath of this evening's Ukrainian ATACMS attack strike on the Luhansk airfield. At least one major brush fire was ignited after the attack, but there's a lot of fire going around. Look at looking all around, there's a lot of fire taking place there. Okay, so more information on yesterday's Ukrainian long-range strike in Luhansk, says this source. According to Luhansk residents, several S-300, S-400 launchers, radars and command post for air defense systems were stationed in the arrival area. So one can, I think, safely assume that the main target was the air defense as opposed to the airfield itself, but it puts the airfield thus at greater risk going forward, although such a strike here would cause the Russians to move any airframes as quickly as possible, you would think. A potential ATACMS cluster missile strike reported in Luhansk. There, the geolocations. In the line of sight, there appears to be some type of facility, buildings, open fields, an old airbase, and some Russian channels report the aviation school was hit. Target could also be an air defense system, which is located between a water treatment facility and the airfield. According to satellite images, equipment has been moved there in the past. So one assumes that would be an air defense battery. And then in Taganrog, so hopefully throughout the day more information will come out from here. Quite often what you see is someone walking around filming the burning wreck of a battery, and that finds its way to the socials. So fingers crossed we'll see that today. In Taganrog, as mentioned, that's down near the Azov Sea, across the border from Donetsk into Rostov Oblast. In Taganrog, the aircraft repair plant was probably hit. Yesterday at noon in Taganrog, fires were recorded in the area of the 325th Aircraft Repair Plant. And again, it's these kind of strikes that take place and that we don't always know about. We didn't hear about this yesterday, sort of comes out today. There are things that are happening on a consistent basis that the Ukrainians are prosecuting that sometimes just go under the radar. A drone is shot down near Moscow, according to the Russian governor. That was yesterday. Russian air defense intercepted a drone over the town of Balashikha near Moscow on the evening of the 27th. So again, prodding and probing in certain places. But we haven't seen one of those mass drone attacks that we saw 2 of in 3 nights back when they struck Novorossiysk and Crimea multiply. We're waiting to see how often they can fire that number of drones. A Russian channel claims another Ukrainian attack in Armavir occurred last night, and that would have been a couple of nights ago now. So that was on the 27th, so that would have been on the 26th, so 2 nights ago. This is that first over-the-horizon big radar array that helps to acquire targets that are missiles or whatever aerial targets within a huge 6,000-kilometer range. They use those for nuclear missile early warning. Ukraine hit one at Armavir, then tried to hit another one much further back into Russia. And then there's a claim that they tried to hit that first one again. Armavir is a location of this over-the-horizon radar, was hit 4 days ago. The radar cost about $150 million. Russians claim that the drone was shot down. Drone wreckage seems unknown. So they are repeatedly going for those really high-value radar systems. Ukraine's drones may also have been targeting, and again, this is what when I say things happen under the radar. There are all these strikes that we're not. So when I say, oh, I'm waiting for another 100 drone strike, or there seems to be this gap between, big drone strike here and a big drone strike there, and we haven't really seen much. Actually, that's not to say there isn't stuff happening that we're just not aware about, and some of it just filters through very slowly. The claim here is that drones have targeted one of his palaces. On the 26th. Again, the dictator's huge mansion closest to Ukraine is on the coast near Gelendzhik in the Krasnodar region, so down that Black Sea coast. Drone debris has been found nearby. No further details than that, but it appears I've been wondering for some time whether they'd try to attack any of Putin's residences. Of course, it's a good PR hit, but it's not exactly useful for the war effort, and you're wondering whether a drone hitting that will have as much effect as a drone hitting a refinery. But I guess they'll try and do certain things to try and prompt certain reactions. I don't know. There'll be some rationale there, of course. And the remains of a new Russian UMPD D-30SN guided bomb. So these are, I think they're making sort of 12 of these 12 of these? How many is it a day? They're making 12 a day. These guided bombs. This was the wreckage, I think, of one of these bombs that was used to hit the epicenter shopping mall, the hypermarket construction hypermarket in Kharkiv. That was a site of all that destruction, a massive fire, a number of people who have died, some still missing. But they found wreckage of bombs that were used there, so that it looks like it was glide bombs that were used to do all of that damage. And finally, we're going to just go back to Starokonstantinov Air Base, which is the air base in Khmelnytsky over towards the west of Ukraine. That is the place where the MiG-29s take off. No, the Su-24s, or probably both, that carry the Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles. They take off from there, and this gets routinely hammered, probably ahead of the F-16s coming as well, because it's likely this will be one of the places they'll take off from. So War Vehicle Tracker says a thread worth looking at showing the impacts of Starokonstantinov Air Base. At least 4 impacts are visible. One of them on a possible aircraft location. If you remember, there were 2 Kinzhals that supposedly shot at the air base that were not shot down, so we don't know where they landed. Then the Ukrainians claimed that they shot down all 12 cruise missiles and all 31 of the drones that were fired into Ukraine. Not all of them at Starokonstantinov, but I think all of the cruise missiles might have been. The question then was, well, are the Ukrainians being accurate about the interception rates? The Russians were claiming some drones and missiles got through, and actually satellite imagery shows that there was some destruction to the base. But War Vehicle Tracker here says, but the place was previously used to place decommissioned planes. So it could well be that the plane, if there was a plane hit, it was a decommissioned one. You would hope by now that if they get warning of missiles and drones in the air, then they get those airframes up in the air as soon as possible. So even with the Kinzhals that are really fast missiles, right, you should have enough time to scramble those jets and get them up. So the ones that do get destroyed at a place like this, which is quite far over to the west of Ukraine, as mentioned, are more likely to be the ones you're not going to get into the air. So they could be decommissioned ones you're using for spare parts, or maybe that you're using for decoys. And fingers crossed that was what was hit when Starokonstantinov was targeted. Words today are really difficult for me. Right, British intelligence has said that Russia's not achieved Putin's goals in Kharkiv Oblast. Quite a few doing analysis on this. It's worth looking at Perun's latest video on the attack into Kharkiv. So British intelligence, Russia's not achieved Putin's goal. Okay, let's look at let's go straight to the original, actually. I much prefer that. So the UK intelligence report says Russian forces are continuing to attack the town of Vovchansk as part of their offensive into northern Kharkiv, which began on the 10th of May. The town remains contested, the defending Ukrainian forces repelling the majority of Russian assaults, with the village of Bravatka, west-southwest of Vovchansk, likely under their control. Russian forces are attempting to achieve physical control of the nearby crossing over the Tversky Donetsk River, thereby threatening the flank of the rear of the defending Ukrainian forces in Vovchansk itself. On the Lukyantsy axis, Russian forces continue to launch attacks in the direction of the village of Lipsy, but that's the one directly north of Kharkiv, but had made no significant progress, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, of the evening on the 22nd of May. So this is going back a few days, admittedly. On the 17th of May 2024, Putin stated that Russian forces were creating a buffer or safety zone in Kharkiv. This has currently not succeeded. The northern Kharkiv front has likely stabilized, with Russian territorial control fragmented and not joined up. Russia's gains in this axis will be limited in the coming week, as Russia's initial momentum has been contained by Ukrainian resistance, and that was from the 26th of May. This is interesting. The British intelligence saying, yeah, the Kharkiv offensive has not achieved what it supposedly set out to achieve. Purin's analysis was interesting. One of the things he said I sort of disagree with. He said that this is the beginning of the period of Ukrainian vulnerability. And I don't think it is. I think you're starting to see a change back the other way. So I think the beginning of Ukraine's vulnerability was really when they stopped getting US support. So you could go right the way back to September. That's the beginning of their vulnerability. The Russians attacked in October in Avdiivka, and then you had 7 months of not getting equipment, running out of stuff. And it was probably about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, just before actually Mike Johnson made the announcement on the US equipment, and then that lag before it getting to Ukraine. That's the most vulnerable time, where the Russians were attacking a number of places. The Ukrainians did not have mobilized troops. They hadn't started their mobilization. They hadn't even passed it through parliament then. They run out of equipment. They were low on everything, and morale was really low. I think actually Ukraine have come a long way in sort of 3 weeks now. So I disagree with Purin, who says this is the beginning of their vulnerabilities. I think this is on the way back up to being at least somewhat prepared for the Russians. And you've got the F-16s not too far away as well. And you've got continued assistance coming in from the West. You've got so many countries still giving the aid packages that they are. We heard from Belgium yesterday, Spain the day before. Lots of little bits today from different nations as well. So I think that the Russians really needed to make hay while the sun shines, really take advantage of that period. I think 3 weeks ago, sort of up until now, I think, if they've not made a major breakthrough now, I think it's going to be less and less likely that they will make a major breakthrough, because they don't have the troops or equipment. And even if they did a mass mobilization, even if they sort of announce that they're going to mobilize hundreds of thousands of soldiers, how long would it take them to actually do that? Put all the things in place, get them actually mobilized, get them trained up and committed to the front line. You're talking a long way off. So this is the moment Russia needed to take the most advantage of the Ukrainians, and I don't think they've succeeded in doing that, but I could be being too positive here. Lucian Kim here, I might leave this for an extra actually if I get time. Yep, I think that's worthwhile. Just a really nice, not nice, but a really interesting analysis of what Ukrainians think. So there's a guy that's gone around Kiev speaking to a lot of people, getting a real sense of the popular psyche and what they think about X and Y, and then saying this is what I found. It's completely anecdotal, but it is a bit of an insight into the Ukrainian thinking, but I'll save that for another time. Shashank Joshi, just something that's worth understanding here. When we survey social media to try and get a sense of what's going on, when we interact with people on YouTube threads, on Facebook threads, on Twitter and Telegram threads, just understand that we are just at the beginning of seeing the manipulation of the socials, the manipulation of people's thinking in terms of disinformation campaigns. Shashank Joshi, who is the Economist defense correspondent, well worth following, said, "Am I being paranoid, or is this LLM-enabled bot, one of hundreds I'm seeing in recent weeks, a little close to home?" So Shashank Joshi comes across Gautam Joshi, which has a face that looks very much like his, surname that is identical, and that has a background that's very similar to his own background. And that's the picture. And this is Shashank Joshi there, and that's Gautam Joshi there, and it appears that this is AI generated, and yet you wouldn't necessarily know that, but that appears to be the situation. He says, "It seems likely someone has fed my picture into an image model and churned out something similar. Replies look like they've been generated in response to particular tweets, but I wonder whether these are also being trained on a corpus of my or others' tweets." In other words, these AI bots, not only are we getting trolls, so real people pretending to be other people, so a bunch of Russians pretending to be Americans online and typing stuff in and going blah 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 blah, and we interact with those kind of trolls all the time. But when you feed in to a program the kind of person that you want and the sort of things you want them to say, then you don't need 100 trolls pretending to be 100 people, or maybe having multiple accounts pretending to be, I don't know, maybe they have 10 accounts each, 1,000 people. You have a computer program that goes and does all of that. You don't need to employ anyone. You just need to get the program sorted and then let it go. There you go. Go and say all this disinformation, and you feed in certain elements of what you want it to say, and then they go out there and say that. And that is an AI generated bot. And my uncanny valley creepy AI friend Gautam is now chipping in on my tweets, says Shashank Joshi. Feels vaguely like the beginning of an episode of Black Mirror. Just, yeah, really, really scary stuff at the moment. So just be warned. Let me know what you think about that kind of activity as well. And, goodness, what do we do about it? Okay, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and speak to you soon.